Alexandra pressed a $4 sticker onto their mother's oak dresser and smoothed it with her thumbnail. "There," she said. "Now somebody might actually take it." Grace stood on the driveway with both hands in her coat pockets. The March wind pushed dead leaves against the folding tables. Behind her, strangers carried pieces of her father's house toward pickup trucks. A man she didn't know had Charles Reeves's socket set tucked under one arm. A woman was turning over April's old stoneware mixing bowl, checking the bottom for a maker's mark. The funeral flowers hadn't lasted 2 months. Alexandra's estate sale had started before the last brown petals fell from the arrangement on the dining room table. Grace looked at the dresser. It had been stored in the upstairs guest room for years. One drawer stuck halfway out. The veneer was chipped along the left side, and pale rings marked the top where someone had left wet glasses. Charles had repaired furniture for 31 years, but he'd never restored that piece. Grace had always wondered why. "That was Mom's," she said. Alexandra didn't look up. She was counting bills from a metal cash box. "I know what it was." "Then why is it out here?" "Because this is an estate sale." Isabella stood beside a table of lamps, winding a cord around her hand. She watched the exchange without joining it. That had become her position in the family. She saw everything, disliked half of it, and waited for someone else to make it stop. Grace pulled one hand from her pocket and touched the sticker. $4. A roll of painter's tape from the garage cost more. "I want it," she said. Alexandra looked up then. Her expression didn't change, but something behind it settled. She had been waiting for Grace to claim something small enough to prove a point. "Fine," she said. "You can have it as your personal item." "My personal item? We all chose something." Isabella looked down at the lamp cord. Alexandra had chosen their father's house on South Court Street. She called it an offset against her share, though the number she put on the house was lower than the county's assessment. Dylan had arranged to take Charles's interest in Reeves and Mills furniture restoration. He said the shop owed him for work he'd done over the years, even though Grace had never seen him repair anything there, except a loose hinge on the bathroom door. Isabella had accepted what remained in the savings account. She said she didn't want the house or the shop and needed the money more than furniture. Grace had been left with the estate sale proceeds after expenses, split according to an accounting Alexandra hadn't finished. That was what Alexandra kept saying. After expenses, after the funeral, after the filing fees, after the roof work Dylan claimed he'd done, after everything visible had found its way towards somebody else. Now there was the dresser. Grace peeled the sticker loose before it could tear. Alexandra held out her hand. "I need that for the inventory." "You just said I could have it." "I did. It still needs a value. It's valued at $4. That's what the sticker says." A customer glanced over, then quickly became interested in a box of extension cords. Grace felt heat rising under her collar. Alexandra had a talent for making private cruelty sound like office procedure. Grace put the sticker in Alexandra's palm. "Write down $4, she said. That morning hadn't been the beginning, of course. Families rarely broke in one clean place. There had been small cracks for years, and Grace had learned to step around them. The final break began on a Tuesday in January, when Charles died at the shop. Grace was at a second-hand furniture warehouse near Alcoa Highway, rubbing a watermark from a maple end table. The warehouse owner paid her by the piece, which meant she worked quickly but never carelessly. Charles had taught her that damage showed up faster when a person hurried. Her phone rang against the workbench. Alexandra's name appeared on the screen. Grace nearly let it go. Alexandra often called while driving between listings, usually because she wanted Grace to remember a birthday, pick up a prescription for Charles, or answer a question Alexandra could have answered herself. Grace wiped her fingers on a rag and picked up. "Hey, where are you?" "At work." There was a pause. Grace heard a car door slam and then wind across the microphone. "You need to come to the hospital," Alexandra said. Grace stopped rubbing the table. "What happened? It's Dad. What happened to Dad?" "They think it was his heart." The room remained exactly as it had been. Fluorescent lights hummed. A delivery truck backed toward the loading dock. Somewhere beyond the partition, the warehouse owner laughed at something on the radio. Grace held the phone tighter. "Is he awake?" Another pause. "Alexandra, is he awake?" "No." The hospital was less than 20 minutes away. Grace made it in 12 and spent every red light gripping the steering wheel as if she could push the car through by force. Isabella arrived at the emergency entrance at almost the same time. She had one shoe untied and no coat. Neither sister spoke as they hurried inside. Alexandra was waiting near the admissions desk with Dylan. She had already been taken into the consultation room. She had already spoken to the doctor. She had already called the funeral home Charles once mentioned after a neighbor died. Taking charge gave Alexandra somewhere to put her fear, and she used every inch of it. He collapsed after lunch, she said. Patrick called an ambulance. They worked on him at the shop and again here. Grace looked toward the secured doors. I want to see him. The doctor's coming back. I don't need the doctor to come back. I want to see Dad. Dylan stepped forward. Grace, just give them a minute. She looked at him, then at Alexandra. Did he say anything? Alexandra folded her arms. Patrick said he complained about his shoulder. Then he sat down. Did he say anything? No. That answer stayed with Grace. Charles had spent his life talking through work. He'd explain why walnut behaved differently from oak, why old glue needed patience, why a crooked drawer could tell you what had shifted around it. Yet at the end, there had been no final instruction, no warning, no sentence meant for one daughter instead of another. The doctor came back and spoke gently. Grace understood every word while refusing the meaning of all of them. Charles Reeves was 56. He had worked Saturday morning, eaten a chicken salad sandwich at his bench, complained that Patrick made the coffee too strong, and died before 2 in the afternoon. When they were allowed into the room, Alexandra went first. Isabella followed and began crying as soon as she saw their father's hand outside the blanket. Grace stopped near the foot of the bed. Charles still wore his work shirt. Someone had cut it open and laid it back over him. There was sawdust caught in the seam of one cuff. Grace noticed that before she noticed his face. She stepped closer and brushed the sawdust away with her thumb. Alexandra stood beside her, one hand pressed over her mouth. For a few seconds, they were only 3 daughters beside the father who had raised them. No property had been counted. Nobody had chosen a side. Then Dylan's phone buzzed. Alexandra looked at the screen. The funeral home needs an answer by 5, she said. Grace stared at her. Not now. They need to know whether we're releasing him. Not now, Alexandra. I'm not trying to upset you. Then stop doing business beside his bed. Alexandra went still. Her grief hardened because anger was easier to carry in public. Somebody has to handle things. He died an hour ago. And that doesn't stop the next hour from coming, Isabella whispered. Can we please not do this here? They didn't continue. They also didn't repair it. In the days after Charles's death, Grace returned twice to the shop. The first time was to collect the jacket he'd left behind. The second was because Patrick called and asked her to sit with him while he locked Charles's office. Reeves and Mills Furniture Restoration occupied a long brick building off South Court Street. The front room held finished pieces waiting for customers. The workshop behind it smelled of shellac, dust, coffee, and the orange hand cleaner Charles bought in large tubs. His bench stood near the rear windows. A dining chair waited in clamps where he had left it. His pencil rested behind a chipped ceramic mug. Patrick Mills sat on a stool with the office key in his hand. He was 61, broad through the shoulders, with gray hair he kept cutting himself. The results were never even. He and Charles had opened the shop in 1995 with 2 borrowed workbenches and a panel truck that stalled whenever it rained. I keep thinking he'll walk in and complain that I moved his awl, Patrick said. Did you move it? No. Then he'd probably complain you didn't. Patrick gave one short laugh. It ended quickly. Grace set Charles's jacket over the back of a chair. Alexandra says Dylan's going through the business records. He asked for copies. Did you give them to him? I gave him the partnership agreement. Nothing else. She says Dad promised Dylan an interest. Patrick looked at Grace. Your father promised me he'd stop buying gas station hot dogs. People promise things. Did he promise Dylan part of the shop? Not in front of me. Grace walked to Charles's bench. On the wall above it were wooden templates, sanding blocks, and 2 hand saws he sharpened himself. Everything had a place. Alexandra says the shop needs money. The shop always needs money. That's different from being broke. Will you keep it open? Patrick turned the key between his fingers. The lease comes up this summer. Charles and I were going to speak to the owner in April. And now? Now the owner knows half the partnership is sitting in probate. Grace understood what Patrick wasn't saying. He didn't only miss his friend, he could lose the place where he had worked for 3 decades. Grief had arrived with paperwork attached to it. Do you need help finishing his jobs? She asked. Patrick considered her. I might. I can come after work. Your father wouldn't want you doing 2 jobs for free. I didn't say free. That brought a little life back into his face. No, he said, you didn't. They locked Charles's office together. Patrick kept the key. Grace took the jacket home and hung it beside her front door because her studio apartment had only one closet. The apartment was above a tax service and a laundromat. One room held her bed, a narrow table, and a small sofa she had repaired after finding it beside a dumpster. The refrigerator made a clicking sound before it started. The bathtub faucet leaked unless she turned it hard enough to hurt her wrist. Charles had offered to help her find a better place more than once. Grace always told him she was fine. It wasn't pride exactly. Alexandra had spent years asking Charles to cover one more payment, one more repair, one more chance. Isabella accepted help more quietly, usually after insisting she didn't need it. Grace had decided early that being easy to love meant being inexpensive. Charles never said that. He didn't need to. Children could make rules from what happened around them, then carry those rules long after anyone remembered how they started. The funeral drew customers, neighbors, distant relatives, and people Grace knew only from stories Charles had told. Alexandra stood beside the casket and greeted each person by name whenever she could. Isabella stayed near the flowers. Grace moved between them, accepting hugs that often ended with someone saying how young Charles had been. Anna Aguilar came near the end. Grace knew Anna as a family friend from Knoxville. She sent Charles a card every Christmas and sometimes appeared at cookouts with a tray of cinnamon bread. Grace couldn't remember anyone explaining exactly how they'd met. Anna was 58, with silver beginning at her temples and a calm way of looking at people. She hugged Grace for a long time. He talked about you, Anna said. Grace managed a tired smile. Hopefully nothing terrible, mostly furniture. That sounds like Dad. And how you refused to let him buy you a proper kitchen table. Grace glanced away. I have a table. He said it folds into the wall. It still counts. Anna smiled, but her eyes were wet. At the wake, the house filled until people stood in the hallway holding paper plates. Someone brought baked ham. Someone else brought 3 bowls of potato salad, and no one knew which bowl belonged to whom. Grace escaped to the back porch for air. The yard was brown from winter. Charles's old metal watering can sat beside the steps. Anna came outside a minute later and closed the door behind her. I wanted to tell you something, she said. Grace waited. Your father used to come to Knoxville most Saturdays. I know. He said he was picking up furniture. Sometimes he was. Something in Anna's voice made Grace look at her. What was he doing the other times? Anna glanced toward the kitchen window. Alexandra was visible inside, speaking to the funeral director. He was keeping a promise, Anna said. To who? That part isn't mine to tell. Not yet. Grace was too tired for riddles. Did Dad owe somebody money? No. Was he in trouble? No, honey. Then what are you talking about? Anna rested one hand on the porch rail. A few years ago, Charles said something to me. I thought he was just tired and angry. Now I'm not sure. What did he say? He said, the girls will get what's easy to see. She'll get what's true. Grace felt the cold through the soles of her shoes. Who was she? He didn't say. Was it me? Anna's gaze held hers. She knew more than she was willing to give. That was clear now. You'll have to ask what he left you, Anna said. He didn't leave me anything yet. We haven't read the will. Then wait until you do. Anna squeezed her hand and went back inside. Grace remained on the porch. Through the window, she watched Alexandra point toward the dining room, while Dylan wrote something on his phone. Isabella carried empty cups to the sink. The girls will get what's easy to see. She'll get what's true. Grace repeated the line until the words lost their shape. The will was read in March at an attorney's office in Maryville. It had been written years earlier and amended only once. Charles named Alexandra personal representative because she was the eldest and, according to the document, experienced with property. Grace almost laughed when the attorney read that part. The visible estate was to be divided among the daughters. The wording sounded fair. The numbers Alexandra brought with her did not. She placed a folder on the conference table. Dylan sat beside her. Isabella sat across from them, rubbing the edge of one thumbnail. Alexandra explained that the South Court Street house needed expensive work. Dylan had prepared an estimate. She proposed taking the house and assuming its remaining costs. What remaining costs? Grace asked. Dad paid off the mortgage. Maintenance, taxes, repairs, that isn't debt. It affects the value. Your commission sheet lists the house for almost twice the value you put here. Alexandra's mouth tightened. Listing price isn't sale price. It's your listing. I know what it is. Dylan leaned forward. The house needs a roof, plumbing, and electrical updates. You replaced the roof 6 years ago. I repaired part of it. You told Dad you replaced it. Grace, Alexandra said, we're trying to settle this without spending a year in probate. Then came the shop. Dylan claimed unpaid contractor work and proposed accepting Charles's partnership interest in satisfaction of that amount. Patrick had not agreed. Alexandra said that could be handled separately. The savings would go to Isabella as an adjustment because Alexandra was taking property and Dylan was taking business risk. Grace looked from one face to the next. And what am I taking? Alexandra slid another paper across the table. You'll receive your share of the estate sale proceeds after costs. Grace read the figure. It was an estimate, not a promise. Even before expenses, it was less than 1 month's rent. You divided everything before we came in. We made a practical proposal. You made it with my share. Isabella finally spoke. Grace, nobody's trying to cut you out. What are you getting? Isabella didn't answer. The savings, Grace said. You're getting the savings. I didn't ask for that arrangement, but you're accepting it. Isabella looked at Alexandra. Alexandra looked at the attorney. The attorney cleared his throat and reminded them that no agreement had to be signed that day. If they disputed the distribution, formal valuation and probate proceedings could follow. Alexandra leaned closer to Grace. That will cost all of us, she said quietly. Dad didn't leave as much as you think. Grace thought of Anna on the back porch. She thought of Charles driving to Knoxville on Saturdays. She thought of a promise no one would name. What about his personal things? Grace asked. Alexandra sat back. We can choose what we want before the sale. What did he leave in writing? Nothing specific. There it was. Not an answer, but an opening. Grace didn't sign that day. Alexandra held the estate sale anyway. By noon, most of the useful tools were gone. Dylan had already removed several machines from the garage. Alexandra said they belonged with the shop interest. Isabella carried a box of Charles's records to her car because Alexandra asked her to keep them safe. Grace watched the house empty piece by piece. Near the end of the afternoon, she returned to the oak dresser. The $4 sticker was gone, but its clean square remained in the dust. Alexandra approached with the cash box. You'll need to move that today, she said. The house has to be cleared by Monday. My apartment's too small. Then don't take it. Grace pulled the sticking drawer. It came out 3 inches and stopped. Their mother had stood at this dresser once. Grace had no memory of it, but she knew it was true. April died when Grace was 2. Everything Grace knew about her came through objects and other people's sentences. She used to keep scarves in the top drawer, Charles had told her once. That was enough. I'm taking it? Dylan helped load it only after Alexandra reminded him that leaving it would delay the cleanout. He complained about the weight as he and Grace carried it toward her aging hatchback. This thing's solid oak, he said. Mostly. Careful with that corner. It's already torn up. Careful anyway. The dresser wouldn't fit until Grace folded the back seats and removed all 4 drawers. Even then, the hatch stayed partly open. She tied it down with rope from Charles's garage. Isabella came outside while Alexandra and Dylan returned to the house. You can put it in my storage unit, she offered. For how long? I don't know, until you figure something out. Grace tightened the rope. Why didn't you say anything in there? Isabella looked toward the house. I didn't know what to say. You could have said the numbers were wrong. I don't know that they are. You could have asked. Alexandra said formal probate would eat everything. Alexandra says whatever makes standing still sound responsible. Isabella folded her arms against the wind. I'm sorry. Grace believed she meant it. That made the apology harder to accept. Are you keeping the savings? Isabella's silence answered. Grace closed the driver's door. As she pulled away, the dresser shifted behind her with a deep wooden knock. At the end of South Court Street, she stopped to check the rope. The dresser's outside frame was nearly as deep as the cargo space, yet the bottom drawer, lying beside it, looked oddly short. Grace held the drawer against the side and measured the difference with her hand. Almost 5 inches. She checked it again. Then she called Patrick. I need somewhere to put Mom's dresser, she said when he answered. The oak one? You remember it? I remember your father refusing to work on it. Why? Patrick was quiet for a moment. Bring it to the shop, he said. Grace drove the 12 minutes to the shop, with one hand ready to catch the rope if it slipped. The dresser knocked softly whenever she turned. It wasn't a loose, rattling sound. It came from deep inside the frame, the same dull note she'd heard at the end of South Court Street. Patrick had opened the rear loading door by the time she arrived. He stood beneath the yellow security light, wearing a canvas apron over his sweater. You tied that with a square knot? He asked. Dad taught me. Your dad tied square knots wrong. He said you tied them wrong. That sounds more like him. Patrick loosened the rope, then studied the dresser through the open hatch. I haven't seen this in years. Alexandra put $4 on it. He looked at Grace. $4? She called it a fair value. She'd charge $600 if it were painted white and sitting in one of her listings. Grace almost smiled. Can we get it inside? They removed it carefully. The frame was heavier than Dylan had made it sound, and its back edge caught on the rubber seal around the hatch. Patrick stopped rather than force it. Lift your side an inch. I am lifting. That's half an inch. My half is younger. Your half is also complaining. They cleared the car and carried the dresser into the workshop. Patrick had made room beside the finishing table, though several chairs and a roll-top desk already crowded the aisle. He set his end down. The dresser rocked on one rear foot. That's new, Grace said. Could have happened in the car. Could have happened when Dylan dragged it down the stairs. More likely. Grace brought in the drawers one at a time. When she slid the bottom drawer into place, it stopped with the front, still an inch from the frame. That was the sticking one? Patrick asked. Yes. Don't push it. I wasn't going to. You had your pushing face. I don't have a pushing face. You absolutely do. He knelt and aimed a flashlight into the gap. Grace stood behind him, rubbing warmth back into her fingers. The shop felt different at night. Without Sanders running or customers coming through the front room, every sound carried. The furnace clicked. Water moved through the old pipes. A delivery truck changed gears on the road outside. Patrick ran one finger beneath the drawer rail. The runner's swollen, he said. Probably moisture. That's all? That's one thing. He pulled the drawer free and laid it upside down on the table. The bottom panel had bowed slightly. One corner joint had opened. Nothing about it explained the missing depth Grace had noticed. She held the drawer against the outside of the dresser again. Patrick watched without speaking. Look, she said. It's short. Old drawers sometimes are. Not 5 inches short. No. Grace found a measuring tape at Charles's bench. She measured from the front edge of the case to the back. 22 inches. Then she measured the drawer. 16 3/4. You're not accounting for the front. I am. Patrick took the tape and checked her work. He did it twice. Grace waited. Well, she asked. Well, your arithmetic survived the public school. Patrick. He looked into the empty drawer opening. It doesn't prove anything, he said. I didn't say it proved anything. You were about to. What would take up that much room? A brace? A repair? Somebody changing the back? Dad? Maybe. You remember him working on it. I remember it sitting in the upstairs room. I remember asking whether he wanted me to fix the veneer. He told me to leave it alone. When was that? A while back? That's not a year. Patrick rubbed his jaw. After we started making regular Knoxville trips. Grace lowered the tape. What Knoxville trips? He seemed to realize too late that he had answered more than she asked. Pickup jobs, he said. Anna said Dad went to Knoxville every Saturday. He went most Saturdays. With you? Sometimes. What were you picking up? Furniture, supplies. That isn't the whole answer. Patrick turned off the flashlight. It's late. Grace didn't move. Anna told me Dad was keeping a promise. Patrick's face gave away very little. He had spent decades dealing with customers who insisted a broken table had arrived that way. Silence was one of his better tools. What promise? Grace asked. You need to ask Anna. She told me to ask what Dad left me. Then maybe she knows something I don't. Grace heard the care in his wording. Patrick hadn't said he knew nothing. He had said Anna might know something he didn't. You're both doing the same thing. What thing? Deciding which questions I'm allowed to ask. Patrick hung the flashlight on its hook. That isn't what I'm doing. Then answer one. He looked at the dresser, then back at her. Your father asked me to keep a confidence, he said. I won't break it because he's gone. Did the confidence involve Alexandra? Patrick's jaw tightened. That's an answer, Grace said. No, it isn't. It's close. He pulled off his apron and folded it on the table. Leave the dresser here tonight. We'll look at it properly in daylight. Grace wanted to keep pressing. She also knew Patrick well enough to see that he wouldn't move. Charles had trusted him for 31 years, because he didn't move easily. She picked up her keys. Don't open it without me. I won't. Don't fix the drawer. I can probably resist. And don't call Alexandra. Patrick's expression changed. Why would I call Alexandra? She's the personal representative. If there's something in there, she'll say it belongs to the estate. We don't know there's anything in there. That's why I said if. He nodded once. Go home, Grace. She reached the door, then turned. Did Dad ever say the dresser was mine? Patrick took a moment before answering. He said it had always been your mother's. That isn't what I asked. No, he said, it isn't. Grace slept badly. The dresser appeared in every version of the dream, though never in the same room. Once it stood at the hospital beside Charles's bed. Once Alexandra sold it, while Grace searched for her shoes. Once Grace opened the bottom drawer and found it went all the way through the wall. She woke before sunrise with the blanket twisted around her legs. Alexandra had sent an email during the night. The subject line read, Personal Property Receipt. Attached was a document assigning the dresser a $4 value against Grace's future distribution. Alexandra asked her to sign and return it. Grace read the message twice. Then she typed, I received the dresser. I do not agree that this settles any part of my inheritance. She stared at the sentence. It sounded more certain than she felt. Alexandra replied before Grace finished making coffee. We can discuss this when emotions aren't so high. Grace set the phone face down. That phrase had been used against her since she was old enough to disagree. Alexandra could raise her voice, slam a cabinet, or make decisions affecting everyone. The moment Grace objected, emotions were high. She turned the phone back over and wrote, My emotions don't change what the document says. No reply came. At the warehouse, Grace repaired a set of dining chairs with loose stretchers. She kept thinking about the missing inches behind the dresser drawer. A brace would have sounded solid. A damaged back would have been visible from outside. Charles could have shortened a drawer after an old repair, but he wouldn't have wasted 5 inches without a reason. By lunch, Grace had drawn the dresser's side profile on the back of a receipt. She marked the case depth, the drawer length, and the space between them. The numbers still left a cavity. Her boss, a narrow man named Howard Bell, stopped beside the bench. You planning a house? A dresser? Looks expensive. It costs $4. Then you overpaid. He moved on before she could answer. At 3, Patrick called. The rear foot isn't broken, he said. Grace tucked the phone between her shoulder and ear. Good. It was shortened. How? Hand plane. Deliberate. Why would anyone shorten 1 foot? To compensate for a floor that wasn't level. Was Mom's bedroom floor crooked? Most floors in that house are crooked. That still doesn't explain the back. No. Grace waited. Did you look? I said I wouldn't open it. That wasn't my question. I looked from the outside. There are newer nails along the rear panel. How new? Newer than the dresser. Dad's? Possibly? She glanced at Howard's office. I'll come after work. You don't have to rush. I'm not rushing. You have your rushing voice. I don't have that either. Patrick ended the call with a sound that might have been a laugh. Grace reached the shop just after 5. Rain had begun, light but steady. She parked near the loading door and found Patrick on a ladder with a bucket beneath a ceiling leak. You've got water coming in, she said. That's usually what the bucket means. Has the landlord seen it? He's seen the invoice. And he says the roof is part of the lease negotiation. Grace took off her coat. Meaning? Meaning, if I renew for 5 years, he'll repair it. And if you don't, he'll let the next tenant enjoy indoor weather. Patrick climbed down and moved the ladder aside. The leak landed close to a mahogany cabinet waiting for finish. Grace helped slide the cabinet farther from the bucket. You can't run a restoration shop with a leaking roof, she said. I've run one with worse. When? The first building, before you were born, the one with no heat? It had heat. It just stayed near the ceiling. They covered the cabinet with a cloth and plastic sheet. The rain tapped harder against the metal flashing. Grace looked around the shop. Half-finished work filled every station. A church pew waited for a new end panel. 2 dining tables stood on padded blocks. Customer tags hung from chair backs. How many jobs did Dad leave? She asked. 11 active, 4 not started. You can't do all that alone. I'm aware. I can take the chair repairs and the washstand. You already have a job. I can leave the warehouse. Patrick gave her a sharp look. Don't make decisions because your sister made you angry. I'm not. You drew a floor plan of a dresser on a receipt. How do you know that? Howard called. Grace stared at him. Why is Howard calling you? Because I taught him how to cane chairs, and he still owes me $40. He said I overpaid for the dresser. He's never had good judgment. She rested both hands on the finishing table. I don't want to go back there tomorrow and repair furniture meant to look good until somebody gets it home. I want to do this work properly. You wanted that before your father died? Yes. Then why didn't you come here? Grace looked toward Charles's bench. Because it was his place. Because working beside him every day had felt like accepting more than she earned. Because Alexandra would have called it another thing Charles gave the youngest. He never offered, she said. Patrick's face softened. He thought you'd ask when you were ready. He knew I don't ask. Yes, Patrick said. That was the problem. The rain filled the pause between them. Grace traced a scratch in the table with her fingertip. Can you pay me? Not what I should. What can you pay? He named an hourly amount slightly higher than the warehouse rate. You said not what you should. The shop rate would be higher if the roof didn't require diplomacy. And if Dylan doesn't get Dad's share? Patrick glanced toward the office. I don't know what happens yet. There was no comfort in that, but it was honest. Grace held out her hand. I'll finish the week with Howard. I start here Monday. Patrick shook her hand. Monday, he said. That was Grace's first decision made after the will meeting that didn't feel like a response to Alexandra. It was small. It didn't settle the estate or answer Anna's strange sentence. It gave Grace somewhere to be on Monday morning, doing work she understood. Patrick released her hand and nodded toward the dresser. Now, we clean it. They moved it beneath the brightest overhead light. Patrick brought cotton cloths, mild soap, a small vacuum, and a tray for loose hardware. Grace removed each drawer and labeled it with painter's tape. The top 2 drawers were full depth. The bottom one was not. They vacuumed dust from the runners. Grace found a straight pin, 2 brown buttons, and a dried sprig of something caught in the upper corner. She placed the buttons in the tray. Mom's? She asked. Could be. Patrick turned one over. Your father kept things like this. He kept bent nails. Only useful bent nails. He said every bent nail was useful. That was one of our longer disagreements. Grace cleaned the drawer fronts. Beneath the grime, the oak showed a warm honey color. The battered dresser hadn't been ruined. It had simply gone untouched for too long. Patrick examined the rear panel from outside. Its nails were dark, but not hand-forged or original. He pointed to shallow dents around 2 heads. Pulled once, he said. Driven back. By Dad? Could have been anyone. You keep saying that. Because we're looking, not guessing. They turned the empty case onto a padded blanket. The back consisted of vertical oak boards set into the frame. At first, nothing looked unusual. Patrick ran his thumb along one joint. Light, he said. Grace held the work lamp closer. Near the bottom, a line crossed the grain. It was so fine she'd mistaken it for a scratch. It continued behind the side rail, then disappeared beneath an old layer of finish. Patrick took a thin metal rule and laid it against the line. What is it? Grace asked. Not sure yet. You are. I'm trying not to be. He moved the rule to the opposite side. The line matched there. Grace crouched beside him. That's a panel. Maybe. A panel behind the back. Maybe. Why would anybody do that? Patrick didn't answer. He tapped the rear board with one knuckle. The sound was flat and solid. Then he shifted his hand 4 inches lower and tapped again. The second sound was hollow. Grace felt it in her chest before she understood it. Patrick tapped once more. Hollow. He sat back on his heels. That isn't a repair brace, Grace said. No, what is it? A space somebody meant us not to notice. Us. Grace looked at him. You knew there could be something here. I knew Charles modified the dresser. I didn't know how. When did he tell you? He didn't. I saw it in the shop one Saturday after he'd finished. He covered it before I got close. And you never asked? I asked. He told me it was April's business. Grace looked at the thin seam again. Her mother had been dead for more than 20 years. Whatever Charles meant, the business hadn't been April's alone. Can we open it? Probably. Without breaking it? Patrick tilted his head, following the grain. That's the question. Grace reached for a narrow putty knife. Patrick put his hand over the handle before she lifted it. Not with that. You said we could open it. I said probably. Your father didn't tack a scrapboard over a hole. This edge is scribed into the frame. What does that mean? It means he shaped the panel to match every little bend and uneven place around it. See how the line disappears here? That isn't filler. It's fitted. Can you take it out? Not until we know how it's held. Grace leaned closer. Under the work light, the seam became clearer. One corner held a tiny triangular mark, no wider than a pencil point. Patrick saw it too. He stopped breathing for a second. What? Grace asked. He took a magnifying lens from the tool cabinet and held it over the mark. The triangle was part of a shallow dovetail cut. Two more appeared farther along the edge, once Grace knew where to look. Patrick set the lens down. Charles did this. You're sure? He used 3 narrow dovetails on hidden repair panels. Always 3. Said 4 looked like showing off. That was the first thing neither of them could explain away. Grace stood, crossed to the shop office, and found a clean notebook in the supply cabinet. On the first page, she wrote the dresser's measurements, the shortened drawer depth, the newer rear nails, the hollow space, and the 3 dovetails. Patrick watched from the work table. What are you doing? He asked, paying attention. She added the date and time. Then she photographed the dresser from every side, including the seam and the small marks Patrick recognized. She emailed the pictures to herself and placed the notebook in her bag. Alexandra had counted on Grace being too hurt to question anything. She had counted on the sale ending the matter. Grace returned to the dresser and rested her fingers beside the hidden seam. Show me how to open it, she said. Patrick looked at the putty knife, then moved it out of reach. We start with the nails. The rear boards had to come off before they could reach the fitted panel. Patrick used a narrow puller with a curved edge. He worked each nail loose by degrees, protecting the oak with a thin piece of leather. Grace held the lamp and collected the nails in the hardware tray. The rain continued above them. Every few minutes, water struck the bucket near the cabinet. Grace counted the drops without meaning to. Patrick removed the final nail and lifted the outer backboard free. A second oak panel stood behind it. Grace leaned closer. The panel looked old because Charles had made it look old. He had darkened the new wood to match the case, copied the saw marks, and rubbed dust into the corners. The 3 dovetails were nearly invisible. Patrick touched one with his thumbnail. That's a scribed seam, he said. The edge follows the wood around it. No straight gaps. No easy place for a tool. Why hide the dovetails? So the panel can't move. Why make them removable? That's what we're finding out. He selected a small wooden mallet and a block of soft pine. He placed the block against the inside edge, then tapped gently. Nothing happened. He changed the angle and tried again. The panel shifted less than the width of a fingernail. Grace saw the dark line open. Again, she said, slowly. Patrick worked from one corner to the next. The dovetails released in order. Charles had cut them to slide only one way. The panel came forward into Patrick's hands. Behind it was a narrow cavity lined with cedar. Grace raised the lamp. A folded document lay flat inside. A brass key rested on top of it, tied with faded blue thread. Beneath both was a small white envelope with Grace written across the front. Nobody spoke. Patrick set the panel on the blanket. Grace reached into the cavity and lifted the envelope. The handwriting was Charles's. He formed his capital G with a gap at the top because he'd once broken his right index finger and never held a pen the same way afterward. Grace ran her thumb beneath her name. Open it, Patrick said. She slid one finger under the flap. The note inside held 2 lines. Ask Patrick what a scribed seam means. Ask the woman with the blue door what Saturdays were for. Grace read it again. Patrick sat down on the floor. He knew you'd be here, Grace said. He hoped. He knew I'd bring the dresser to you. He knew you wouldn't throw it away. How? Patrick gave her a tired look. You kept a broken toaster for 3 years because your father said he might need the cord. He did need the cord. No, he needed you to let go of the toaster. Grace looked back at the note. The woman with the blue door is Anna. Patrick didn't deny it. You knew that too. Yes. What did Dad do in Knoxville? The note tells you who to ask. I'm asking you, and I'm telling you that part belongs to Anna. Grace picked up the folded document. It was heavier than ordinary paper, with a county stamp visible through the back. When she opened it, she saw the words, "Quitclaim Deed" near the top. The legal description beneath it meant nothing to her. Lot numbers, boundary lines, a reference to an old plat book. She moved down the page, looking for names. Charles Reeves appeared as grantor. The April Reeves Legacy Trust appeared as grantee. Farther down was an address: 412 and 414 Winona Street, Knoxville, Tennessee. A recording stamp showed the deed had been filed in 2018. Grace looked at Patrick. "What is this?" "A deed. I can read that." "Then that's one question settled. Why is Mom's name on a trust?" Patrick took the paper only after Grace offered it. He held it by the edges and read the first page. "I never saw this copy," he said. "But you knew about the property." "I knew Charles bought a duplex." The word widened the room. Grace had expected an old bill, perhaps a letter or a photograph, not a property address, not a recorded deed hidden behind 5 inches of oak. Dad owned a duplex, the trust did. What's the difference? I'm not the person to explain that. Did Alexandra know? No. Isabella? No. Why did he tell you? Patrick looked toward Charles's empty bench. Because I worked on it with him. Grace sat beside the open dresser. On Saturdays, some of them. You told me you were picking up furniture. We did pick up furniture. You left out the building. Charles asked me to. He also wrote my name on an envelope. I know. Did he say this was mine? Patrick folded the deed along its existing creases. He said he was protecting something for you. Grace stared at him. That sounds like yes. It sounds like what he said. Why didn't you tell me after he died? Because knowing a building exists isn't the same as knowing who legally owns it. Charles was careful. He wanted you to find the papers in his order. What order? Patrick nodded toward the brass key. Grace picked it up by the blue thread. It was a simple key, older than the door keys she carried. Someone had filed a small notch into its round head. What does it open? I don't know. Patrick, I don't. I know the duplex. I know Anna lives there. I never saw that key. Grace placed the deed, note, and key on the finishing table. She photographed each item. Then she slid them into separate clear sleeves Patrick found in the office. Her hands stayed steady until she finished. I'm going to call Isabella, she said. Patrick shook his head. Call a lawyer. I don't have a lawyer. Then find one before you call your sisters. Isabella isn't Alexandra. No, but she gave Alexandra the records today. Grace looked up. What records? You saw her carry a box out. She said Alexandra asked her to keep them safe. She delivered them to Dylan's office this afternoon. How do you know? He called me about an old invoice he found. Grace put her phone back in her pocket. Patrick stood slowly, one hand braced on the table. Your father hid a recorded paper in a dresser and left instructions for you. Whatever the reason, he didn't want it handled with the rest of his office. Then why didn't he tell me? That's for Anna, too. The rain began to ease. Water still dripped into the bucket, but more slowly now. Grace slid the sleeves into her bag. I'm not leaving these here. I wouldn't. Can the panel go back? Yes. Do it. Patrick looked at her. You want to hide the cavity again? I want it protected until I know what this is. They replaced the fitted panel and outer boards. Patrick used the original nails, pressing them into the old holes by hand before tapping them flush. The seam disappeared again. Only the bottom drawer remained on the work table. Grace took the documents home and placed them beneath the loose board under her kitchen sink. It was the only hiding place in her apartment. Charles had repaired that cabinet the year before and shown her how to lift the board if the drain leaked. She kept the brass key with her. The next morning, she called the number Anna had written in the funeral guest book. The call went to voicemail. Anna, it's Grace. I found something in Mom's dresser. Dad left a note that says I should ask the woman with the blue door what Saturdays were for. I think that means you. Please call me. She didn't mention the deed. By noon, Anna hadn't answered. At 1, Isabella came into the warehouse. Grace saw her through the glass partition near the register. Isabella carried 2 coffees and wore the same worried expression she'd had beside the estate sale tables. Howard pointed toward the repair area. Isabella thanked him and walked back. I brought yours plain, she said. You remembered. You've taken coffee the same way since you started drinking it. Grace accepted the cup, but didn't open it. What do you need? Alexandra said you won't sign the property receipt. She sent you? No. Did she tell you to talk to me? She said you were upset. Grace set the coffee on the bench. There's that word again. I'm not here to fight. Then why are you here? Isabella lowered her voice. Because I don't want this to become something we can't fix. Grace looked at the half-repaired chair between them. It already became that. It doesn't have to stay that way. Are you giving back the savings? Isabella flinched. Grace hadn't meant to ask so quickly. She also didn't take it back. The transfer isn't finished, Isabella said. That wasn't my question. I don't know what I'm doing yet. You're doing what Alexandra planned. I didn't plan anything. No. You just keep carrying the boxes. Isabella stared at the floor. For a moment, Grace nearly told her to leave. Then she thought of the deed under the kitchen sink and Patrick's warning. She should have kept quiet. Instead, she said, Dad hid something in the dresser. Isabella looked up. What? Papers? What kind of papers? I don't know yet. That wasn't quite a lie. Grace knew what the first page called itself. She didn't know what it did. Why would he hide papers? Isabella asked. That's what I'm trying to find out. Does Alexandra know? No. Isabella's face tightened. Grace, if it's part of the estate, she has to know. It was inside the one thing she gave me. She didn't know it was there. That doesn't make it hers. I didn't say it did. You were about to. Isabella held her coffee with both hands. What did the papers say? Grace picked up the chair stretcher and fitted it into the open joint. I'm not telling you yet. The hurt on Isabella's face was real. So was the fear beneath it. Do you trust me at all? She asked. Grace pressed the joint into place. I did at the attorney's office. Isabella left both coffees and went out without another word. Anna returned Grace's call at 4:20. Her voice sounded strained. Where are you? At work. Do you have the key? Grace sat straighter. You know about the key. Do you have it with you? Yes. Don't give it to anyone. What is it open? Come to Winona Street tomorrow. Bring Patrick. Why can't you tell me now? Because some things need to be seen where they happened. Grace looked through the warehouse window. Rain had left the parking lot silver beneath the late afternoon light. Alexandra took the house. Dylan's trying to take Dad's part of the shop. Isabella took the savings. If this deed means what it looks like, I need to know. Anna went quiet. You found the deed too, she said. Yes. Then Charles was right about the dresser. What was he right about? That you'd look before you let anybody decide what it was worth. Grace heard a door close on Anna's end. Tomorrow morning, Anna said. 9 o'clock. 412 Winona Street. Mine is the blue door. The call ended. Grace stayed seated with the phone in her hand. A few minutes later, Howard came through the repair area carrying his coat. There's a woman out front asking for you, he said. Grace expected Isabella. Alexandra stood beside the register with Dylan. She wore her work blazer and held a leather folder against her chest. Isabella had been gone less than 3 hours. Alexandra smiled when Grace approached. Hey, she said. We heard you found some of Dad's papers. Grace stopped several feet away. Who's we? Your family? Isabella told you. She was concerned. Dylan glanced toward the employees working near the loading dock. Can we talk somewhere private? No. Alexandra kept her smile in place. Grace, nobody's accusing you of anything. Dad's records need to be included in the estate accounting. That protects all of us. They were inside my dresser. They were inside Dad's house until yesterday. The dresser was assigned to me. For $4, Dylan said. That doesn't mean documents hidden inside become yours. Grace looked at him. Did you come here to give legal advice? I'm trying to keep this simple. Alexandra opened the leather folder. Just hand over whatever you found. I'll have copies made, and if it has nothing to do with the estate, you can have it back. No. The smile finally left Alexandra's face. You don't know what you're holding. Neither do you. That's exactly why I need to see it. Grace thought of the email Alexandra had sent. She took out her phone and opened the attachment. You assigned me the dresser and put its value in writing. That receipt isn't signed. Your email says, I received it. Grace, stop. No. It was only one word, spoken quietly. Alexandra wasn't prepared for it. Dylan stepped closer. If Charles used business assets to acquire anything, Patrick may have a duty to disclose it. Then you can speak to Patrick. We will. Alexandra closed the folder. Dad didn't hide things from us, she said. Grace felt the brass key against her leg inside her pocket. He did, she said. That's the part bothering you. Alexandra's face changed. For the first time, concern gave way to alarm. Grace returned to her workbench and picked up the chair stretcher. Behind her, Dylan said something low to Alexandra. Grace didn't turn around. At 9 the next morning, she and Patrick were on the road to Knoxville. They took Alcoa Highway north beneath a low gray sky. Patrick drove because his truck had room for tools, though Grace had reminded him twice that they weren't going to repair anything. Tools live in the truck, he said. I'm not taking them out to make a point. Grace kept the document sleeves on her lap. The brass key was threaded onto a shoelace around her wrist. Traffic thickened near downtown Knoxville. Patrick turned east, then followed smaller streets into Park Ridge. Grace knew the neighborhood mostly by name. Old houses stood close to the sidewalks, some freshly painted and some still waiting. New townhouses had appeared between narrow cottages. A coffee shop occupied what had once been a corner market. 2 streets over, a construction crew was tearing the siding from a house, while a polished black sport utility vehicle waited at the curb. Winona Street ran along a slight rise. Patrick slowed near the middle of the block. There, he said. The duplex stood behind a low chain-link fence. It was a 2-story brick building with a wide front porch divided down the center. The door on the left was dark blue. The door on the right was cream. Brass numbers above them read 412 and 414. The blue paint was recent. The porch was not. One gutter sagged near the corner. 2 floorboards had darkened from water. The brick steps were sound, but the iron railing leaned away from its base. Grace looked at the deed on her lap, then at the building. This whole thing, Patrick parked along the curb. That's the address. You've been here. Yes. How many times? Enough to know that gutter was straight in December. Grace turned toward him. You came in December? Charles needed help replacing a basement window. And you didn't think to mention any of this after he died? I thought about it every day. That answer took the sharpness out of her next question. Anna opened the blue door before they reached the porch. She wore jeans, a thick green cardigan, and work gloves. A small pile of wet plaster lay on newspaper inside the entrance. You got here, she said. What happened to the ceiling? Patrick asked. Bathroom pipe. It started dripping at 6 this morning. He looked at Grace. Don't say it, she told him. Tools live in the truck. Anna stepped aside. Come in before the floor gets wetter. The left unit opened into a front room with tall windows and plain wood trim. The furniture looked collected rather than purchased as a set. Books filled 2 shelves. A sewing machine stood beneath the stairs. The ceiling near the hallway had opened in a brown, sagging circle. A metal bowl caught the drip. Grace stared at the stained plaster. When did Dad buy this place? Anna removed her gloves. 2018. Why didn't we know? He didn't want you to. Any of us? Not then. Patrick brought in a wrench and shut off the water to the upstairs bathroom. Anna put on coffee. Grace stayed near the front window, where she could see both halves of the porch. A man from the cream door unit came outside carrying a lunch bag. He raised one hand when he saw Anna through the window. That's the other tenant? Grace asked. Yes. He works an evening shift at the hospital laundry. How long has he lived here? 4 years. There was a couple before him. Who collects the rent? Charles did. I mailed checks to a post office box. So did everyone else. Everyone else? Former tenants. The place has 2 units, but people came and went. Charles kept every name. Grace looked toward the kitchen. Where did the money go? Anna didn't answer at once. Patrick came downstairs, wiping his hands on a cloth. The supply line split, he said. I shut it off. We need a new length of pipe before she can use the sink. I can get one, Grace said. We need to talk first, Anna told them. They sat around a round kitchen table. Grace placed the deed note and key in front of Anna. Anna touched the blue thread tied around the key. I tied this, she said. Grace leaned forward. When? Last summer. Charles kept losing it among the others. What does it open? I'll show you. Not until you tell me why my father owned this building. Anna folded her hands in front of her. He bought it at a delinquent tax auction, she said. It was in bad condition. The right unit had no working kitchen. The left one had a hole in the bathroom floor. Half the windows were covered with plywood. Why this place? He said it was something whole. Grace waited for more. That doesn't answer anything. I know. Did he buy it for you? No. Then why do you live here? Because I needed somewhere I could afford. and he needed someone he trusted in the building. How much rent do you pay? Anna named an amount well below what Grace expected for Knoxville. That can't cover everything. It covered taxes, insurance, repairs, and some savings after both units were occupied. Whose savings? Anna glanced at the deed, the trusts. Grace took out the recording copy and flattened it on the table. What is the April Reeves Legacy Trust? Something Charles set up after he bought the property. For who? Anna looked at Patrick. Patrick stayed silent. Grace felt anger rise again. Please stop checking with each other before you answer me. We're not, Anna said. You are. Both of you have had years to decide what I'm allowed to know. Anna's eyes lowered. You're right, she said. Charles asked for secrecy, and we got used to obeying him. He isn't here to decide anymore. Then tell me. The trust was for you. The kitchen became very quiet. Grace looked at the water stains spreading above the hallway. She heard the refrigerator motor and a truck passing outside. For me, how? I never saw the full papers. Charles told me the building would pass to you if anything happened to him. Why? Anna pulled a tissue from the box near the window and folded it without using it. That answer is downstairs. You know the answer. I know parts. Charles wrote the rest because he wanted you to hear it from him. Grace glanced at Patrick. Did you know the trust was for me? Yes. And you still let Alexandra move Dad's shop interest toward Dylan? I didn't let her do anything. I've refused to sign every paper Dylan sent. You could have told me I owned something. I knew Charles meant the property for you. I didn't know whether he finished the legal work. If he hadn't, telling you could have put you in a fight over something you couldn't prove. Grace tapped the recorded stamp. This is proof. It's the start of proof, Patrick said. A deed into a trust isn't the same as papers naming who controls it. Anna stood. That's why we're going downstairs. The basement entrance was beneath the staircase. Anna unlocked the door with a key from her pocket. Cold air moved up the steps. Grace followed her into a long basement divided by a brick support wall. New copper pipe ran along the joists beside older galvanized lines. Shelves held paint cans, furnace filters, and labeled jars of screws. Patrick pointed toward a basement window. That's the one we replaced. You and Dad? Yes. What else did you do here? Floors, cabinets, porch posts, wiring after a licensed electrician checked it. Charles handled most of the finish work. Grace ran her hand over the stair rail. The underside had been rounded into a shallow curve. Charles shaped rails that way because April once complained that a sharp edge caught her rings. He had been in every part of the building. Grace could see it now. Anna walked to the rear wall behind the furnace. A wooden cabinet had been fitted between two brick columns. It looked like a shallow utility box, the sort that might cover an electrical panel. She opened its plain outer door. Inside was a locked toolbox built directly into the wall. The box was oak, darkened to match the basement joists. Its lid opened outward rather than upward. A brass keyhole sat near the lower edge. Grace lifted the key from her wrist. It opens that? Anna nodded. What's inside? Charles never showed me. You knew it was here. I watched him build the outer cabinet. He told me the box was for records and that the right key would find the right person. Grace inserted the brass key. It stopped halfway. She tried again. Lift while you turn, Patrick said. How do you know? Charles built locks into desk drawers the same way. He liked making people earn the turn. Grace lifted the key, felt something settle inside, and turned it clockwise. The lock opened. The front of the toolbox lowered on two chains, becoming a narrow shelf. Inside were 3 items. A green credit union passbook sat on top. Beneath it lay a thick ledger bound in brown cloth. At the back was a large envelope sealed with red wax. Grace removed the passbook first. The account name read, April Reeves Legacy Trust. She opened it. The first deposit had been made in 2018. Later pages showed deposits every month, along with withdrawals for taxes, insurance, materials, and repairs. The final printed balance was $86,000. Grace checked the line again. Is this current? Anna leaned closer. Charles updated it in December. Patrick let out a slow breath. Grace turned through the pages. The deposits weren't large alone. They had gathered year after year, rent by rent, after every roof patch and water bill. This was all from the duplex? Most of it, Anna said. Charles put in some of his own money during the first year. He lost his savings before this. Anna's face changed. Grace saw it. What? That's part of the letter. What does Alexandra's business have to do with this? Anna looked toward the toolbox, more than she wants anyone to know. Grace set the passbook on the lowered door and opened the ledger. Charles's handwriting filled the pages. Each tenant had a section: move-in dates, deposit amounts, rent paid, repairs requested, notes about work schedules, and preferred contact times. Beside Anna's first entry, he had written, "Blue door when she chooses the color. Let her choose something." Later pages contained material receipts copied in neat columns: lumber, pipe, tile, furnace service, window glass. Patrick's name appeared beside some jobs, always followed by paid in full. "You charged him?" Grace asked. "Every time. He told me you helped. I did. He still paid me." "From the shop?" "No. Personal checks at first. Then trust checks after Landon explained the account." "Landon?" "Landon Armstrong," Patrick said. "Title attorney. Charles used him when he set this up." The name appeared several times in the ledger: recording fee, trust review, annual filing check. Grace took out her phone and photographed every page. Near the back, she found a folded county envelope. The property tax bill inside was stamped past due. The deadline printed at the bottom was less than 3 weeks away. Anna read over her shoulder. Charles usually paid that in February. He was gone. "I know. Can the trust pay it now?" "Not until someone has authority over the account," Patrick said. Grace touched the passbook. "There's $86,000 sitting here, and you can't walk into a credit union with a hidden key and take it." "I don't want to take it. I want to pay the bill. Then we call Landon." Grace photographed the tax notice too. A leaking pipe waited overhead. Taxes were past due. A man next door paid rent to someone who was dead. The duplex wasn't a prize sitting safely in a box. It was a building with people inside it, and every unanswered question had a due date. She returned the ledger to the shelf and reached for the sealed envelope. Grace Reeves was written across the front. Below her name, Charles had added, "Read this inside the house." They carried everything upstairs. Patrick drove to a hardware store for the pipe. Anna called the tenant next door and told him the water would be off briefly. Grace sat alone at the kitchen table with the passbook, ledger, and envelope. Anna returned from the porch and placed 2 fresh cups of coffee between them. "Before you open that," she said, "there's something you need to understand." Grace waited. "Charles didn't buy this place because he thought property would make you rich. It wasn't worth much then. Some people thought the city would condemn it. Then why hide it? Because by 2018, he no longer believed visible things stayed safe around the family." Grace looked at the envelope. "What happened?" "You know Alexandra's flip failed. I know Dad lost money. You don't know how much. You don't know what she asked him to do after." "What did she ask?" Anna shook her head. Charles put it in his own words. Grace broke the wax seal. The letter inside was 9 pages long, written by hand. She unfolded the first page and saw the date. Charles had written it 6 weeks before he died. The opening line was simple: "Grace, if you were reading this, the dresser did what I needed it to do." She stopped and rubbed the edge of the paper between her fingers. Anna sat across from her without leaning in. Grace continued. "Charles wrote that he had avoided telling her because spoken promises could be pulled apart after a death. He wanted the property recorded, the account funded, and the instructions placed somewhere only Grace would value enough to repair. He began with Alexandra. In 2015, she had come to him with plans for 3 houses. She had found neglected properties, Dylan would handle construction, and Alexandra would sell them. The numbers looked reasonable. Charles understood old buildings, and he believed he could recognize a project worth saving. He lent her his savings. The first house sold late. The second needed foundation work Dylan hadn't included in the budget. Alexandra borrowed against the expected sale to begin the third. By the time Charles understood how the debts crossed between them, his original loan had become the money holding all 3 projects together. In 2017, the market in their price range slowed. Buyers walked away. A lender demanded payment. Alexandra sold 2 houses at losses and refinanced the third under terms. Charles called, desperate. Grace lowered the page. "How much did he lose?" Anna answered quietly. "Almost everything he had outside the house and shop." Grace looked back at the letter. Charles didn't write the exact amount. He wrote about the day Alexandra came to the workshop with Dylan and asked him to borrow against the building equipment. They said one more infusion would save the remaining project. Patrick had been there. He returned from the hardware store while Grace was reading that part. He set a length of pipe and a paper bag of fittings near the sink. She wanted him to secure her loan with his shop interest, Patrick said. Grace looked up. And Dylan? He said the equipment could cover it if things went wrong. The equipment you use to work. That was my concern. What did Dad say? No. Patrick's answer was immediate. He said it once. Alexandra kept talking. Dylan showed him figures. Charles said no again and asked them to leave. Grace found the same exchange in the letter. Charles regretted raising his voice. He didn't regret the answer. Alexandra had not forgiven him. She still owed money from the failed venture. Some debt had been refinanced, some moved on to credit cards and business accounts, and some covered by commissions from later sales. From the outside, she and Dylan looked successful. They drove good cars, held open houses and new clothes, and spoke about investments as if the old losses had been a lesson already paid for. They were still paying. Anna watched Grace reach the next page. That Christmas was at your father's house, she said. Grace remembered it. Alexandra had brought expensive wine and opened the second bottle herself. Isabella left early because she had a headache. Grace spent most of the evening washing dishes while Charles and Alexandra argued in the den. I heard yelling, Grace said. So did I. What happened? Anna folded and unfolded the tissue in her hands. Alexandra asked whether your father was changing his will. Why? She thought he was punishing her for the business. Was he? No. He told her he hadn't made any decision about the will. Grace returned to the letter. Charles described Alexandra following him into the kitchen. She accused him of treating Grace as if she were better than her sisters because Grace hadn't asked for money. Grace remembered standing at the sink with hot water running. Alexandra had looked at her once, then told her to leave the room. Grace had left. Anna hadn't. She said he always saved the soft voice for you, Anna told her. She said Isabella got help without begging, and you got praised for refusing it. Dad didn't praise me. Not to your face. Grace looked at the pages. What did he say about me? That you made do until making do became a habit. He worried you'd rather sleep on a floor than let him buy you a bed. Grace glanced toward the front room. The house around her had solid walls, repaired windows, and worn floors someone had cared for every Saturday. What did Alexandra say after that? Anna's hands stopped moving. She said she'd burn the whole estate down before she watched Charles give the good stuff to someone else. Grace had expected the line because the letter was leading toward it. Hearing it aloud still made her set the pages down. Those exact words? Yes. Was Dylan there? He came into the kitchen after. He told her she'd had too much to drink. That isn't the same as disagreeing. No. Patrick opened the paper bag of fittings. Charles told me about it the next morning. Is that when he decided to buy this place? No, Anna said. He'd already been watching the tax auction list. That night decided what he would do with it. The letter confirmed it. Charles bought the duplex the following year. It was cheap because most buyers saw repair costs and difficult tenants. He saw 2 homes attached to one foundation. If one side stood empty, the other could still carry part of the expense. If the neighborhood improved, the property would grow. If it didn't, it could remain useful. He named the trust after April because the money he had lost began as savings they built together. He named Grace sole beneficiary because she had never treated his help as something owed. That sentence made Grace uncomfortable. She read it twice, hoping the second reading would soften it. It didn't. This makes it sound like he'd love me because I didn't cost anything, she said. No, Patrick said. It says I never asked. Keep reading. The next paragraph answered her. Charles wrote that Grace's refusal to ask had frightened him. After April died, Grace learned to need less because the older girls needed loudly. Charles had mistaken quiet for strength. By the time he understood, Grace had built a whole life around not becoming a burden. The duplex was not payment for being easy. It was his attempt to leave her something that required her presence, judgment, and care. Something she couldn't receive by making herself smaller. Grace pressed her lips together and looked away from the page. Anna stood and carried the untouched coffee to the sink. She gave Grace the privacy of movement rather than leaving her alone. Charles wrote that Alexandra's anger wasn't only greed. She had spent years trying to turn the failed venture into proof that she was still capable. Every unpaid balance threatened the life she displayed to clients. Every asset Charles kept beyond her reach felt, to Alexandra, like a judgment. He understood her fear. He did not trust it. That was why he kept the duplex outside his probate estate. If it appeared in the will, Alexandra could delay, pressure, undervalue, or trade it against something else. Isabella would agree to avoid conflict. Grace would surrender ground rather than make the family fight. Charles had predicted the conference room almost exactly. He had not predicted his own death would come before he explained it. The final pages contained instructions. Grace was to take the recorded deed, trust records, and passbook to Landon Armstrong. Landon would verify the recording and arrange the transfer of trustee authority. Until then, she should sign nothing concerning the duplex and give no original documents to Alexandra or Dylan. Grace read the last paragraph aloud. Keep Anna's rent where it is. Don't sell because the first number sounds large. Walk through both units, learn what the place needs, then decide what kind of owner you mean to be. Beneath that, Charles had written, I should have told you sooner that needing something doesn't make you expensive. Grace stopped. The letter ended with his name, not Dad. Charles Reeves, signed the same way he signed repair estimates and shop checks. For several minutes, no one spoke. Patrick fitted the new pipe under the bathroom sink. Anna dried the floor. Grace sat with the letter spread across the table, hearing ordinary work continue around her. At last, she asked, Why did Alexandra rush the estate sale? Anna looked toward Patrick. Patrick tightened a fitting and answered, Because Dylan's credit line comes due this spring. Grace hadn't known that. How do you know? He told Charles before Christmas. He wanted Charles to sell his shop share directly to him at a discount. Charles refused. So, the shop isn't something Dylan wants to run. No, he wants to sell it. Or borrow against it. Grace thought of the roof leak in the lease renewal. She thought of Alexandra taking the house at a low value while calling it a burden. The house could be listed after probate. Dylan's claimed shop interest could support a loan or be forced into a sale. Isabella's savings share cost Alexandra the least and bought her agreement. The division wasn't hurried because probate was expensive. It was hurried because Alexandra and Dylan had a deadline. Does Isabella know? Grace asked. I don't know, Patrick said. Anna returned to the table. Alexandra is afraid of losing more than money, she said. Her clients think she understands property. Dylan's customers think his business is steady. If they sell the house quietly and turn the shop interest into cash, the old debt stays private. And if Dad hid a property from them, then there may be enough value to solve their problem. Grace looked at the deed. That's why she came to the warehouse. Yes. She doesn't know what I found. Not yet. Grace's phone rang inside her bag. Alexandra. Nobody told Grace whether to answer. She put the call on speaker and set the phone near the deed. Hello? Alexandra's voice was calm. Can we try this again? What do you want? I want to help you understand whatever you found. I'm getting help. From Patrick? From people Dad trusted. A pause followed. Patrick has his own interest in this, Alexandra said. If there are assets tied to the shop, he benefits from keeping them away from probate. Grace looked at Patrick. He shook his head once. What assets? Grace asked. I don't know because you won't show me. Then why are you saying they're tied to the shop? Dylan said the paper may concern property Dad worked on using business funds. Dylan hasn't seen it. He knows Dad. No. He knows there might be money. Alexandra's breathing changed. Grace, you have no idea what it costs to keep things together. You rent one room. You work by the hour. Nobody depends on you. The words landed because they were close to something Grace already feared. She kept her voice level. How much do you owe? Silence. Patrick stopped working beneath the sink. Anna stood beside the table. Alexandra said, That's none of your business. You made Dad's property your business. I spent years helping him. He spent his savings helping you. You don't know what happened. I know about the 3 houses. I know about the shop equipment. I know Dylan's credit line comes due this spring. The call remained connected, but Alexandra said nothing. Grace could picture her calculating who had spoken and how much they knew. When Alexandra finally answered, her voice was lower. Dad wouldn't have had that money if I hadn't brought him opportunities. He lost it. He made a choice. So did you. I'm not discussing this over the phone. You called me. Alexandra ended the call. Grace picked up the phone. Her hand shook once, then settled. Patrick finished the pipe and turned the water back on. Anna opened the faucet. Clean water ran into the sink without dripping below. Grace gathered the documents into their sleeves. "I need Landon's number," she said. Patrick wrote it on the back of a shop invoice. Grace called from Anna's kitchen. A receptionist answered, checked the schedule, and offered an appointment the following afternoon. When Grace gave her name, the receptionist paused. "Mr. Armstrong has a sealed file under Reeves," she said. "He asked that we make room if you ever called." Grace looked at Charles's letter. "I'll be there," she said. Landon's office occupied the second floor of a renovated bank building near downtown Knoxville. The old vault door remained in the lobby as decoration. Grace noticed it because Charles would have complained that nobody had restored the brass properly. Patrick waited downstairs. He said the file belonged to Grace, and she should hear what it meant before anyone else did. Landon Armstrong met her in a small conference room. He wore a dark suit without a tie and carried a flat document box beneath one arm. "Your father first came here in 2018, he said. "He told me you might arrive much later." Grace placed the deed, passbook, ledger, and letter on the table. "Did you know about the dresser?" "Only that Charles had chosen a private place for your instructions." "He chose a $4 dresser." Landon looked at her. $4? That's what my sister valued it at. He opened the document box. Charles would have enjoyed that detail. Inside was the original trust instrument, a certified copy of the recorded deed, insurance records, tax statements, and a sealed envelope marked for successor trustee. Landon compared Grace's copy of the deed with the certified one. He checked the recording number, page reference, notary seal, and property description. Then he turned the certified copy toward her. "This deed was recorded in Knox County in 2018. Charles transferred the duplex out of his own name and into the April Reeves Legacy Trust. So, it wasn't his when he died?" "Correct. He managed it as trustee, but it didn't belong to his probate estate. Can Alexandra challenge that?" "People can object to almost anything. That doesn't mean they have a valid claim." Grace looked at the thick trust document. "And I own it? You're the sole beneficiary. The trust names you successor trustee after Charles's death. Once you accept that role and we file the notice, you control the property under the trust terms. What are the terms? Maintain the duplex, pay its expenses, and use or distribute its income for your benefit. You may live there, rent it, improve it, or sell it. No other family member is a beneficiary." Grace read the first page. April's name appeared at the top. Hers appeared several lines below. Why didn't this come up in probate? Because it shouldn't. The house on South Court Street was Charles's personal property. His shop interest was personal property. This duplex was not. What about the account? If the credit union records match the passbook, it belongs to the trust. "There's a late tax bill." Landon nodded. "We'll send notice of your appointment today. The credit union will need certified documents and identification. It usually takes several business days to update authority. The tax deadline is sooner than that. I can request a short extension from the county. If they refuse, you may pay it personally and reimburse yourself after the account opens." Grace had enough for rent and groceries. She didn't have enough for a duplex tax bill. "I can't pay it personally. Then we make the extension request first." Landon placed a form in front of her. It was an acceptance of successor trusteeship. Grace read every line. She had signed repair receipts, apartment leases, and employment forms. None of them had asked her to accept responsibility for a building, an account, and the homes of people she had met only the day before. "What happens if I don't sign?" she asked. "The trust remains without an acting trustee until a court appoints one. Could Alexandra become trustee? Not under this document. Could Dylan? No. That mattered more than Grace wanted it to. She signed. Landon notarized the form, then made certified copies for her. He placed one full set in a new folder and closed it with a metal fastener. "This is your proof of authority," he said. "Keep the originals somewhere secure. Don't carry them between your apartment and the shop. Alexandra asked me to give her everything. Don't. Dad wrote the same thing. He knew her better than I do." Grace told him about the estate division, Dylan's claim against the shop, and the visit to the warehouse. Landon listened without interrupting. "Has anyone filed an objection concerning the trust?" he asked. "Not that I know." "Then don't argue the case before one exists. Let the documents speak only where they need to." He requested a current title search while Grace sat across from him. The county record showed the trust as owner. No mortgage appeared. No lien appeared. The only open item was the late property tax. Landon printed the result. "Clean title," he said. "That's unusual for a property bought through a tax auction. Dad spent years making it clean." "Yes." Grace ran one finger down the page until she reached the Winona Street address. The duplex was real. The trust was real. Her name was real. No sister's agreement could trade it away. Landon closed the file box. "Before you decide what to do with the property, get it appraised and inspected. Park Ridge values have moved quickly since 2024. "How quickly?" "Enough that your father's letter was right about the first number sounding large." He gave her two names. One was an inspector. The other was Jennifer Wolfe. Jennifer met Grace at the duplex 2 days later. She arrived in a gray sedan carrying a tablet, measuring device, and camera. She was 39 and spoke in a brisk, friendly way that made clear she had another appointment after this one. "I've worked around Park Ridge for several years," she said. "I'm also valuing nearby parcels for a redevelopment client. I disclosed that to Mr. Armstrong. If that bothers you, use another appraiser. What does your client want?" "Connected lots, mostly. Your duplex sits outside their current group, but they've asked me to flag owners who may consider selling. I haven't decided anything. That's why we separate the appraisal from any offer. I value what's here. You decide what you want." Grace appreciated the directness. They began outside. Jennifer measured the lot, photographed the brickwork, and examined the sagging gutter. "The porch needs attention," she said. "I know. Roof age? About 12 years, according to the ledger. Windows? Most replaced between 2019 and 2022. Heat? Separate systems." Patrick joined them from the basement. He had come to finish the pipe repair and inspect the water damage. Jennifer asked him about the electrical work, floors, and foundation. Patrick answered with dates and pulled invoices from Charles's ledger. "You have unusually good maintenance records," Jennifer said. "He kept unusually good records," Patrick replied. They walked through both units. The cream door tenant had left a key with Anna and written permission for entry. His unit was smaller than Grace expected, but clean. The kitchen cabinets were plain oak, built by Charles. One door needed adjustment. Grace fixed it while Jennifer measured the room. "You work on furniture?" Jennifer asked. "Restoration. That explains the screwdriver in your pocket. It also explains why this door was bothering me." Upstairs, Jennifer looked from a front window toward new construction at the end of the block. "Most of the value increase isn't inside," she said. "It's the lot and location, meaning someone would tear it down. Some buyers might, others would renovate and raise rents." Anna stood in the hall. "How much higher?" Jennifer gave a market range nearly double what Anna paid. Anna's face stayed calm, but Grace saw her grip the stair rail. "I'm not changing anyone's rent today," Grace said. Jennifer looked between them. "That's an ownership choice, not an appraisal question." The inspection took almost 3 hours. Jennifer sent the written report the following morning. She valued the duplex at approximately $340,000 in its current condition. Repairing the porch, gutter, plaster, and several smaller items could raise the number. So, could removing the tenants and selling to an investor planning higher rents. Attached to the appraisal was a separate letter. Jennifer's redevelopment client offered $340,000 in cash. They would cover ordinary closing costs and complete the purchase within 30 days. The offer required both units to be vacant at closing. Grace read that sentence twice. She was sitting at Charles's bench in the shop. Patrick worked across the room, fitting a replacement leg to a dining chair. "Well?" he asked. She handed him the appraisal. He put on his glasses and read it. "That's a serious number," he said. "They want Anna out. They want both units empty." "Same thing?" "It is." Grace looked around the workshop. $340,000 could buy a modest house in Maryville and leave money for years. It could give her a better apartment by the end of the month. It could solve Patrick's lease problem, though she had no right to make that decision for him. It could remove every immediate fear that had kept her awake since Charles died. It could also turn the blue door into construction debris. "What would you do?" she asked. Patrick handed back the report. "Charles told you to walk through both units before you decided." "I did." "Then what did you see?" "People living there." "That's your answer for today. Jennifer gave me 10 days. Then you have 9 more answers available." Grace placed the appraisal in Landon's folder. The front bell rang. Isabella entered carrying a large brown envelope. She looked as if she hadn't slept. Her hair was pulled back unevenly, and she kept checking the street through the front window. "Is Alexandra with you?" Grace asked. "No." "Does she know you're here?" "No." Patrick removed his glasses and moved toward the rear of the shop, giving them space. Isabella placed the envelope on Charles's bench. "I need you to see something before Dylan files anything," she said. "What is he filing?" "He and Alexandra met with a probate lawyer yesterday. They're going to claim Dad used shop money on whatever property you found." Grace felt the room narrow around the words. They don't know what property it is. They know it's in Knoxville. Dylan checked Dad's mileage records against old invoices. "What's in the envelope?" Isabella opened it and removed printed screenshots from the family group chat. Alexandra had created the chat after Charles died. Grace had muted it during funeral week and later found herself removed. The first message was dated before Grace found the false back. Dylan had written, "If your dad hid anything outside the will, we challenge it as a shared improvement. Shop labor, shop tools, family money. Doesn't matter what it is," Alexandra replied. "We need Isabella with us before Grace gets ideas." A later message read, "If there's property, keep her from getting control until we know the value." Grace looked at Isabella. "You knew they planned this?" "I thought Alexandra was upset and talking. You carried Dad's records to Dylan." "I know." "You told her about the papers." "I know." Isabella's voice broke on the second answer, but she didn't look away. "Why are you giving me this now?" "Because Jennifer's car was seen at the duplex. Alexandra knows the appraisal is finished. Dylan's filing Monday." Grace gathered the screenshots and placed them beside the certified trust documents. For the first time, she held proof of two separate things. Charles had given the duplex to her. Alexandra and Dylan had decided to attack that gift before they knew what it was. The objection arrived Monday morning. Dylan signed it as a creditor to the estate. Alexandra signed beneath him as personal representative. Their lawyer filed it in Charles's probate case and sent copies to Landon, Patrick, Isabella, and Grace. The filing claimed Charles had used Reeves and Mills, labor, equipment, vehicles, and money to improve an undisclosed Knoxville property. It asked that the duplex and any related accounts be treated as part of the general estate until the shop could be repaid. The word undisclosed appeared 6 times. The Winona Street address appeared once. By noon, the credit union had paused Grace's trustee transfer. Landon explained that the objection did not prove Dylan's claim or change ownership. The bank had chosen to hold the account until the dispute was resolved. "So we can't pay the taxes," Grace said. "Not from the trust. The deadline is next week. I got the county to extend it through Friday. And after Friday, fees increase. Nothing disappears overnight, but we don't want it sitting unpaid." Grace stood in the shop office with the phone against her ear. Through the window, Patrick dragged a file box from beneath a shelf. How long can they keep the account frozen? If this becomes full litigation, months. Grace looked toward Charles's bench. Dylan and Alexandra had chosen the one pressure point Charles's letter warned about: delay. They didn't need to prove ownership immediately. They needed Grace frightened enough to trade it. "What do they want?" she asked. "They proposed a family settlement." "What kind?" "You transfer the duplex to the probate estate. Alexandra sells it. After paying their claimed expenses, the remainder is divided among the 3 sisters. And the account? Same treatment." Grace nearly laughed. "They take control first and do the math later." "That is the proposal." "No," I assumed. Landon had requested an emergency mediation before the extended tax deadline. Dylan's lawyer agreed quickly, which told Landon they expected Grace to negotiate. The meeting was set for Thursday at the Knox County Courthouse Annex. A retired probate judge named Margaret Caldwell would mediate. Patrick spent Monday and Tuesday going through records. Reeves and Mills kept customer files by year. The oldest were handwritten carbon copies stored in bankers' boxes. Later files had printed invoices, receipts, and payment records. Grace helped carry them from the back storage room. 31 years of this?" she asked. "Your father didn't trust computers. He didn't trust your computer." "My computer once deleted a month. You unplugged it during an update. It should have warned me more clearly. They separated every invoice connected to Charles personally. Over the years, he had paid the shop for work on his house, Alexandra's first office desk, Isabella's dining table, and Grace's repaired sofa. Each invoice showed the same practice. Materials at cost. Labor reduced but recorded. Payment from Charles's personal account. The Winona Street records began in 2018. Floor repair, window restoration, cabinet construction, porch posts, basement shelving, truck mileage. Every job had been billed. Every bill had been paid by Charles or the trust. Patrick found copies of the checks stapled behind the invoices. Dylan knows these exist, Grace said. He saw boxes. He didn't go through all of them. He filed anyway. He expected me to protect the shop by accepting his claim. Why would that protect it? If the estate owes Reeves and Mills money, Dylan can say his inherited interest is more valuable, but he doesn't own the interest yet. No, and you never agreed Dad owed the shop. No. Grace placed another paid invoice in the mediation file. Patrick looked older beneath the storage room light. If this claim succeeds, he said, Dylan won't keep the shop open. The lease isn't useful to him. The equipment is. Will you say that Thursday? I'll say what I know, not what I think. That was why Charles trusted him. Anna gathered rent records and contacted former tenants. 2 agreed to provide written statements. 1 had moved to Chattanooga, but remembered paying Charles through the trust post office box. Another still lived in Knoxville and offered to attend. Grace asked Anna not to fill the mediation room with people. Why, Anna said. Alexandra is counting on nobody knowing what Charles did here. We need proof, not a crowd. People are proof. They are. But I don't want this to become a family performance. Anna considered that and agreed to attend herself. She brought copies of every canceled rent check she still had. Jennifer prepared a signed appraisal summary. She also agreed to appear and explain the cash offer if the value was disputed. Grace did not answer the offer. On Wednesday evening, Isabella came to the shop. She stood near the front door, holding her phone. Alexandra knows I gave you the screenshots, she said. How? She asked why I wouldn't sign a statement supporting the objection. What did you tell her? That I wasn't signing something I knew was planned before they saw evidence. Grace set down the drawer pull she was polishing. What did she say? She said I'd chosen you. Did you? Isabella looked toward the back room, where Patrick was making copies. I chose not to lie. That isn't the same thing. No. Grace waited. Isabella unlocked her phone and opened the original group chat. The messages were still there with their dates and account names. Landon said screenshots can be questioned, she said. He wants the phone available. Will you bring it? Yes. Will you tell the mediator why you carried Dad's records to Dylan? Isabella swallowed. Yes. And why you told Alexandra about the papers? Yes. Grace believed her. Belief wasn't forgiveness, but it was enough for Thursday. The courthouse annex had beige walls, gray carpet, and windows that looked over a parking garage. The mediation room held a long table with water pitchers at both ends. Grace arrived with Landon and Patrick. Anna came a few minutes later, carrying a canvas file bag. Jennifer entered last and sat near the wall. Isabella had chosen a chair between the 2 sides rather than beside either sister. Alexandra and Dylan arrived together with their lawyer. Alexandra wore a navy suit Grace recognized from her real estate advertisements. Dylan carried a rolled set of plans and a binder thick enough to look important from across the room. He seemed relaxed. Alexandra did not look at Anna. Margaret Caldwell entered, asked everyone to silence their phones, and explained that the opening session would be held together. Each side would state its position. Private discussions could follow if needed. The purpose is to see whether the dispute can be resolved without further court action, she said. It is not an opportunity to turn family history into evidence unless that history bears directly on the claim. Alexandra folded her hands. Dylan opened his binder. Grace kept Landon's file closed in front of her. Caldwell asked the objecting parties to begin. Dylan's lawyer spoke first. He said Charles had operated a closely held business with incomplete separation between personal and shop expenses. He said substantial labor and materials had gone into the Winona Street duplex without repayment. Patrick wrote 1 word on the pad in front of him, false. Grace saw it but did not react. The lawyer continued. Because the duplex had increased sharply in value, he argued that the shop, and through Charles's shop interest, the estate, held an equitable claim against the property. Caldwell looked at Dylan. Are you asserting that Mr. Reeves purchased the property with business funds? Yes, Dylan said. Do you have a purchase record showing that? We have evidence of a pattern. That wasn't my question. Dylan adjusted his binder. We believe discovery will produce the purchase records. Caldwell made a note. Are you asserting that shop labor was unpaid? Yes, all of it, a substantial amount. Are you asserting the trust was created to conceal estate assets from the other heirs? Alexandra answered before her lawyer could. Yes. Her voice carried clearly through the room. Grace looked at her eldest sister. Alexandra kept her eyes on the mediator. Our father didn't tell the family about this property, she said. Grace gained access to documents after his death and worked with Patrick to keep them from the estate. We believe Charles used family resources, including resources that should have supported all 3 daughters. What family resources? Caldwell asked. The shop, his savings, time that belonged to the business. Time isn't usually an estate asset. You know what I mean? I need to know exactly what you mean. Alexandra took a breath. She explained that Charles had helped each daughter differently. He had funded her business. He had given Isabella cash when needed. Grace, she said, received years of free training and access to the shop. Grace said nothing. Caldwell turned to Dylan. What remedy are you seeking? Dylan unrolled the plans. They were drawings of the duplex with estimated improvement costs written along the margins. We want the property and the trust account brought under probate control, he said. The duplex should be sold. Verified expenses should be paid to Reeves and Mills and to my contracting company. The remaining value can be distributed fairly. To all 3 daughters? Yes. And who would manage the sale? Alexandra is the personal representative and a licensed real estate agent. Caldwell looked at Alexandra. Would you collect a commission? Alexandra hesitated. An ordinary one, she said. Isabella closed her eyes. Caldwell asked whether they would withdraw the objection if Grace paid the claimed expenses while keeping the duplex. Dylan and Alexandra spoke quietly with their lawyer. Then Alexandra answered, no. The property was hidden from the estate. We want it returned to the estate. There was no uncertainty left in the room. They had claimed the purchase money, the repairs, the account, the sale, and the commission. They had put every part of it on the record in front of the people Charles had trusted. Caldwell turned to Grace's side. Mr. Armstrong, she said, does your client wish to respond? Landon opened the file. Yes, he said. But first, I'd like Mr. Brown to confirm that his claims are based on records he has personally reviewed. Dylan's lawyer leaned toward him. Dylan answered anyway. They are? You reviewed Reeves and Mills' invoices? Yes. Trust bank records? Some records. Did you find one unpaid invoice connected to Winona Street? Dylan looked at Alexandra. That shop didn't always invoice family, he said. Patrick pushed his chair back. It did when family work used shop time. Caldwell held up one hand. You'll have your turn. Landon placed the certified deed on the table. This was recorded in 2018. Charles Reeves transferred the duplex to the April Reeves Legacy Trust. The trust names Grace Reeves sole beneficiary and successor trustee. The property was not owned by Charles when he died. It cannot be returned to an estate it never entered. He laid the trust instrument beside it. Caldwell checked the recording numbers against the title report. No mortgage, she said. No lien, Landon added. No shop claim, no contractor claim. Dylan opened his binder. That doesn't answer where the improvement money came from. Patrick carried 2 file boxes to the center of the table. It came from Charles, he said. Then from the trust. He handed Caldwell the first invoice from 2018. Behind it was a copy of Charles's check. Then came the windows, floors, cabinets, porch work, basement shelving, mileage, and materials. Every invoice was marked paid in full. Patrick placed an older stack beside them. 31 years of records show the same practice. Charles paid the shop for personal work. I own half of Reeves and Mills. I'm not owed money for Winona Street. Caldwell looked at Dylan. Do you have a contrary invoice? No. A canceled payment from the shop? No. A sworn statement from anyone who performed unpaid work? Dylan's face had reddened. I did work for Charles over the years. At this duplex, he hesitated. No. Anna spoke next. She explained the Saturday repairs, the rent checks, and Charles's instructions. She placed her canceled checks on the table, each payable to the trust. He told me Grace would own the building, she said. He kept it private because Alexandra threatened to destroy the estate rather than let him choose differently. Alexandra stared at her. I was drunk. You were clear. That was a family argument. It became relevant when you filed this. Jennifer handed over her appraisal. The duplex is worth approximately $340,000, she said. That value comes from the property, the neighborhood, and documented improvements. I found no basis for a separate contractor claim. Caldwell turned to Isabella. Isabella unlocked her phone and placed it beside the printed screenshots. "These messages are from our family group chat," she said. Dylan proposed challenging whatever Dad hid before Grace found the deed. Alexandra wanted me aligned with them before Grace learned its value. Alexandra read the messages from across the table. "Isabella," she said quietly. "I carried the records for you," Isabella replied. "I told you about the papers. I won't help you turn that into proof it was yours." Caldwell compared the dates. The first message preceded the opening of the dresser's false back. She closed Dylan's binder. This objection was planned before the objecting parties knew the asset, its ownership, or its funding, she said. "The recorded deed controls. The invoices defeat the improvement claim. The trust account is not a probate asset," Dylan's lawyer whispered to him. Caldwell continued. "The emergency objection is dismissed. I will send notice to the credit union today. Mr. Brown, a late filing built on claims you did not verify comes very close to an abuse of this process. Do not file it again without evidence." Dylan looked down. Alexandra remained upright, but the certainty had gone from her face. Grace spoke for the first time. "I'm not asking for their house or Isabella's savings. I'm not asking for anything they divided. I'm keeping what Dad placed outside that division." Alexandra looked at her. "You'd let the family lose the shop over this?" "The shop isn't yours to sell." Patrick nodded once. "And the duplex?" Alexandra asked. "No." Grace didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The credit union released the account the next afternoon. Grace paid the overdue taxes before the county office closed. A week later, Jennifer met her on the duplex porch with the cash offer. "It expires today," Jennifer said. "They may increase it if you counter." Grace handed it back unsigned. "I'm not countering. Are you sure?" Grace looked through Anna's blue door. Anna was inside rolling paint over the repaired ceiling. "Yes." Jennifer slipped the offer into her folder. "Then fix the gutter before the porch pays for it. I've already ordered one." That Saturday, Grace and Patrick replaced the damaged porch boards. Anna worked beside them, handing up screws and objecting whenever Patrick tried to move her flower pots without asking. The tenant from the cream door unit came outside during lunch. "My transfer went through," he told Grace. "I'm moving to Chattanooga at the end of next month. You don't have to leave because ownership changed. I know. The hospital job pays more." He gave proper notice, and Grace returned his full deposit when he moved. She spent the next month repairing that unit rather than raising its rent for someone else. Isabella came twice to help. The first time she painted a bedroom wall and said little. The second time, she brought lunch and stayed after the work was done. "I'm returning the savings to the estate accounting," she said. Grace set down her brush. "Alexandra will fight you." "Probably. You don't have to give up everything to prove something to me." "I know. I'm asking for a proper accounting. Whatever is actually mine, I'll accept." Grace studied her sister's paint-spattered hands. "I don't trust you yet," she said. "I know. But you can come back next Saturday." Isabella nodded. That was where they began. Grace used part of the trust income to guarantee Reeves and Mills's renewed lease. She didn't buy control of the shop or make Patrick indebted to her. The trust received a small secured interest, written plainly by Landon, and Patrick kept running the business. The landlord repaired the roof. In the duplex garage, Grace cleared one bay for a restoration workshop. Patrick gave her Charles's spare workbench after the probate papers confirmed Dylan had no claim to it. Anna found an old radio at a church sale. Isabella brought shelves. Customers began arriving with chairs, small tables, and cabinets they had been told weren't worth fixing. Alexandra came to the shop once. She stood outside the open garage while Grace repaired the rail on April's dresser. "Are you going to shut me out forever?" Alexandra asked. "I don't know. That's cruel. No, it's honest." Alexandra looked at the dresser. The chipped veneer had been replaced. The drawers ran smoothly. Grace had kept the marks on the top because they belonged to its life, not its damage. "I was scared," Alexandra said. "I know. Dad made me feel like one mistake was all I was." "It wasn't one mistake. It was what you kept asking everyone else to lose so you didn't have to face it." Alexandra had no answer. Grace didn't ask her to stay. She also didn't tell her never to return. Alexandra left with clarity and a closed door, which was all Grace could offer. By early summer, Grace moved into the cream door unit. She carried her repaired sofa in first. The oak dresser came last. Patrick helped her lift it up the stairs. "Your side's low," he said. "My side's younger," still complaining. They set it against the bedroom wall. Grace slid the bottom drawer into place. Behind it, the false cavity remained empty. The deed and trust papers were secured at Landon's office. She kept Charles's note in the top drawer beside April's 2 brown buttons. That evening, Anna brought cinnamon bread through the connecting yard. Isabella arrived with coffee and stayed until the porch lights came on. Patrick left early because the shop had 3 jobs waiting Monday morning. Nobody spoke about $4. If stories about young people rebuilding a life after family betrayal matter to you, subscribe and return for the next inheritance story. After everyone had gone, Grace stood in the restored living room at dusk. The garage light glowed below. The blue door was visible across the porch, and her mother's oak dresser stood upstairs where a dresser belonged, finally, plainly, home.